Okay, Switch 2. Not heard too much on it recently. There's been something of an information void. And perhaps unsurprisingly, a range of Switch 2 reports have kind of sprung up to fill that void. We've got a few different reports which we're going to be talking about. First of all, let's talk about leaks that have emerged from Switch peripheral maker Mobapad. They claim to have new information on the Switch 2. They're saying that they've acquired a lot of first-hand information about the system, and they're talking about Joy-Cons, which are actually rather different to the current ones, which actually attach to the Switch to magnetically, as opposed to using that kind of fiddly guardrail system that we've got at the moment. And this follows similar claims from Spanish games website Vandal the previous week, which had a similar claim. Yes, Mobapad says that it will be achieved using electromagnetic suction technology controlled by electrical current, which is quite interesting. But it does kind of suggest that the existing Joy-Cons, if they are compatible with the new machine, it would only be via Bluetooth. I don't think you'd be able to mount them if the rails physically aren't there. Other reports that have emerged this week. This is interesting. There's been a report from businesskorea.co.kr, basically saying that Samsung are having a huge input into the Switch 2 beyond fabricating the processor. OLED screens and whatnot, which kind of goes against previous reporting saying that there would be LCD screens, but maybe there's going to be a secondary model coming along at some point, which probably makes sense. Recently, the Forks, noted mobile specialist on YouTube, guest appeared on Moore's Law is Dead and was talking about the Switch 2 possibly hitting something like 1.3 gigahertz, 4 teraflops in docked configuration. They were also talking about the undocked iteration running much slower, 800 megahertz. I'd actually say that would be quite high.
I'd say that's high.
Also, yeah. Oliver, what do you make of all of this?
Well, there's certainly a lot to get through here.
Yes.
I guess I could give my thoughts a little bit on each one in turn. So I think the rumors about the physical aspects of the new device are interesting. They're talking about a new button beneath the S, L, and SR buttons behind the device, which is very interesting. They're also talking about making the S, L, and SR buttons out of metal, which is interesting. I don't know what that would be for personally. Maybe it's because they're capacitive, possibly, just spitballing, right?
Right. I thought
Yeah. And the buttons on the behind of the controller, those are interesting as well. That's the typical space where we see remappable buttons on other portable handhelds. So perhaps that's what it is, or maybe it's for another purpose. They are suggesting in that report that the existing Joy-Cons will be compatible and that the existing Pro Controller will be compatible. So you kind of think maybe that's just button remapping, because if it was integral to the system's function, then those controllers presumably wouldn't be capable of supporting the new system, or maybe just for specific games or something. That's the general vibe I get. Yeah, back compat is another possibility. And there are some other really interesting reports here. Probably the thing that gets me the most that's really interesting is there's this report from the Korean Business Journal, and also in a tweet from someone else, that the Switch 2 SoC might be on Samsung 7 nanometers LPH, but the H is interesting, because there is no Samsung 7nm LPH process
that we're aware of. Yeah.
That we're aware of. There's LPP, LPU, which are low power early, low power plus, low power ultimate. Those are the typical monikers that Samsung uses. LPH presumably would be Nintendo specific, possibly. And then the last time they used LPH, I looked it up, was for 28 nanometers, and there it stood for 28 nanometer low power high performance. So that gives you a sense of what it might be. But as far as I know, this is not shipped in any products. It presumably is a 7 nanometer class process that is similar to the other processes. And that in and of itself is a huge development, because as far as we're aware, up until this report, it seemed quite likely that the system would be using an 8 nanometer process from Samsung. But if that's changed, that means that the system will presumably be a lot more power efficient and could actually have a lot more power on board, especially in the handheld mode, right? It's really exciting to see them use a more modern process than the kind of modified 10 nanometer process that was previously suggested.
Or it could just be another refinement of that process. We just don't really know at this point, do we?
Yeah,
Intel style. Yeah.
But yeah, that's been the big point of controversy over the capabilities of the Switch 2, because, the sort of existing products that the Switch 2 processor has most in common with are on that 8 nanometer process that was used for the Ampere GPUs. And the issue there is that it's quite power hungry. And the sheer transistor density isn't really that great, meaning that you'd have a hot, large processor, which kind of doesn't fit with the concept of a handheld device. Which makes, when we're talking about those conversations between Moore's Law is dead and the forks, that's sort of, they're talking about quite high clock speeds based on an 8 nanometer part. 800 megahertz for a handheld device on 8 nanometer would actually be quite power intensive. I was considering like 750 to be a top end there, but who knows? 1.3, 4 teraflops would be roughly 1.3 gigahertz for docked play. The existing Switch runs at 921 megahertz, I think. No, it's 768. But even so, that would still be, a considerable amount of clock speed to expect a mobile device to cool 1.3 gigahertz. I guess it's all going to come down. I mean, the whole discussion about the Switch 2's capabilities, the process node of the chip has always been the big point of contention because, 8 nanometer is cheap, but it is not a great fit for a mobile device. So, yeah, I'm really going to be interested to see how this all pans out, as usual. Lots of Switch 2 information emerging. How credible it is, we just don't know. Any thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that at least the process node thing pans out and that it isn't just 8 nanometer, part 2 or 10 nanometer part 2. I do hope it is actually something very specific for the Switch. And I think if you look at the amount of units that Switch 1 has sold, and it's had a die shrink, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe this is, there's actually enough financials there to secure like something very specific and almost like exclusive to Switch 2, because they know that they're going to sell hundreds of millions of these in the next, X amount of years, like Switch 1, if the forecasts are there. So maybe there is actually some great credence to this.
Yeah, that's actually a little remarkable when you think about it, because the Switch was using repurposed, but actually totally acceptable and actually very high performance for what it was, mobile technology. The Tegra X1 was not designed for the Switch, as far as we're aware. It was basically picked from the parts bin, so to speak.
Yeah.
But for this upcoming machine, they don't really have a nice converging design from NVIDIA to pick from. It seems like they've had to go their own way with their design and actually get something that's totally custom and totally unique. So that's interesting, in its own sense, that Nintendo's actually probably pouring a lot of money into developing this thing, which they haven't had to do necessarily previously with prior machines.
Oh my gosh, no, the Wii U? No.
Yeah.
I would just say, as usual, that Nintendo, they're into software design more than hardware design. And, there's always been expectations of cutting-edge silicon from Nintendo, which haven't really emerged since GameCube. So, we do need to keep our expectations in check. But nonetheless, it is nice to see some discussion points emerging and to do some thought experiments about what might be possible.